For more than 150 years, these Swaminarayan Mandirs have brought comfort and the word of God to the people of India. But in the 20th century, it was Lord Swaminarayan's fourth successor who was to be the inspiration that was to spread Hindu faith far away from India, indeed as far away as London. It is an almost incredible story, and it all begins in this simple house in an ordinary and very unlikely road in North London. Up until the 1960s in England, there were only a few hundred Hindus who followed the Swaminarayan teaching. They met together to worship in their own houses and offices, but they had no real mandir of their own. None, that is, until 1970, when together they bought an old and unused Christian chapel and turned it into a small mandir. In May 1970, Yogiji Maharaj fulfilled a promise that he would come himself to England when there was a mandir prepared for him to inaugurate. He was in East Africa at the time, and in an aircraft specially prepared for him, he flew from Uganda to London. He was an old man, but in his mind he had a vision for the future which even those close to him knew nothing of. It was a vision that in only a few years would produce a spectacular result. When he arrived in England, he stayed in this simple house in North London. Pictures taken at the time show clearly what a kind, warm and holy man he was. After nearly a month, a Naga Yatra was performed, and the images which had been brought from Kampala were carried through the streets and shown to the people of London. He came to the River Thames and carried out a ritual blessing. He touched the trees and gave blessings to all the people of London. The small mandir created in an old Methodist chapel was inaugurated on the 14th of June 1970. For those few hundred faithful followers, it was a great spiritual occasion, and nobody who was there had any idea that anything would happen so soon to change their lives. Only Yogiji Maharaj himself knew what the future would bring. After the mandir was open, and while he was staying in that small house, Yogiji Maharaj told his followers in England that the day would soon come when their newly opened mandir would be far too small. He told them that they should build a great marble mandir in London, and that hundreds of thousands of people would benefit. He promised them that it would happen, and though it seemed incredible at the time, his followers believed him. And so, the following year, leaving his promise behind, he left the world and took his place in Akshardham. It was Pramukh Swami Maharaj who was to take on the enormous responsibility left behind by Yogiji Maharaj. An undertaking that required his total dedication. He traveled far and wide in India, meeting people, giving his love, his leadership, and his blessing to all of them. Such a task would have daunted any ordinary man. But despite everything else that was on his mind, Swamiji never forgot the promise that had been given to those followers so far away in London. In 1972, thousands and thousands of Indians were forced to leave their homes in Africa and emigrate to Britain. As Yogiji Maharaj had foretold, the existing mandir was far too small. they moved to a slightly larger mandir, and next to that, they found a site that would provide enough space for them to build the most magnificent and the largest mandir outside India. Looking at that derelict ground, it still seemed an almost impossible dream. In 1991, plans were drawn up for a mandir and a cultural centre based on traditional Indian design, but developed so that they would satisfy British building regulations. When a model was unveiled, it was obvious that the task was enormous. It was obvious, too, that when it was built, this mandir would add a new and magnificent landmark to the drab surroundings of North London. Nothing like it had ever been seen before. The foundations were laid at the end of 1992, the largest amount of concrete ever laid in Britain in one day. But it is the story of the stones that will probably be remembered forever. It was to be built of marble quarried from Italy and India, and limestone from Bulgaria. 5,000 miles away in Kandla, one of 4 main sites in India, the rough stone arrived from Europe, here to be cut, shaped and carved by 650 craftsmen working day and night. It was the finest marble that could be found anywhere in the world. It needed to be, because this stone had to stand for 1,000 years and resist the worst of weather and pollution that London would provide. The task was to cut 26,300 blocks of stones that would be fitted together like a vast three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Every piece had to be marked out so that halfway across the world it would fit into its rightful place precisely to a tiny fraction of an inch. And it was done in India because it was only here that stone carvers were available to create the intricate and beautiful designs that the architect demanded. In Kandla, those 650 craftsmen worked on the Italian marble and Bulgarian limestone that would form the exterior and much of the interior of the mandir. Every piece was shaped, carved, polished and packed, ready for the journey to London. Over 160 containers were packed and shipped to England over 2 years. And in all that time, not one single stone was even scratched on the journey. Back in Neasden, the problem was to pinpoint every stone in the right order, so that starting at the bottom, the assembly could begin. There were 100 full-time volunteers from the Swaminarayan mission and more than 1,000 part-time volunteers working day and night. The first foundation stone of the mandir was ceremonially laid by Dr. Swami on the 12th of June 1993, only 2 years and 2 months before the date chosen by Swamiji as the day of inauguration. Back in India, if any of the volunteers doubted the importance of what they were doing for a moment, they were about to lose any fears, because this was the day when Swamiji himself came to see how they were getting on. It was an impressive sight. Every worker knew that if the stones were not ready on time, then the mandir could not be finished on time. And there was no question in anybody's mind that the opening date could ever be delayed. From what he saw that day, it was crystal clear that the workers here were doing everything humanly possible to produce the most perfect pieces, ready to fit into the giant jigsaw puzzle about to be created far away. And if anybody doubted that Swamiji himself was completely involved in what was going on, he soon made it clear that he was. Not one single detail of the construction went unnoticed. Nothing was done without his total approval. In London, the main structure of the Haveli was already up, and as for the Mandir, the stones which had been so carefully carved in India were now beginning to take their places. Here and there, it was possible to see clues as to what was about to emerge, but mainly, for all the volunteers, what was involved was basic grinding work, and a lot of it. And then, slowly, like a butterfly emerging from a chrysalis, it became possible to see the size, the shape, and indeed some of the details of the wonderful building that was being created. Many workers from India were now arriving to carry out the intricate construction that could only be done by the most skilled craftsmen. It was now, when the shape of the Mandir was beginning to emerge, that work suddenly stopped for just a few hours. Swamiji himself came to see what all the planning, the carving, and the hard, relentless work had achieved. He saw what had been done, met all those who were responsible, and perhaps even he wondered at the beauty of what was beginning to tower up above the houses of North London. It was indeed becoming everything that the architects had promised and the plans and the model had predicted, only it was more, much, much more. By the beginning of 1995, the people who passed by outside were able to see what was being created in the borough of Brent, an area which before had little to separate it from the rest of North London. Now it had a landmark that would become famous throughout the world. With only a few months to go before the inauguration, the work became almost frantic. Hundreds and hundreds of volunteers worked day and night in order to finish on time. The craftsmen from India were creating the final details, the last small pieces of the puzzle. With only weeks to go, it seemed almost impossible that it would be achieved, but every day one could see the changes that were taking place. The ornamental gateway went up. Inside the mandir, the carved roof beams were hoisted into place. And the great dome dominated everything that lay below it. The Haveli was built mainly of wood, teak from Burma and English oak from Devon. They used 221 trees and planted 2,600 saplings to replace them. No Haveli had ever been built anywhere in the world, even in India, in the last 500 years, to match this one, either in size or in the beauty of its construction. But even this magnificent building, for all its beauty, paled beside the mandir, now almost complete. It had been built from drawing board to total completion in no more than 3 years, a time that even those who worked on it could scarcely believe. By the 13th of August 1995, those who were involved really did have something to celebrate. If, up to now, Londoners had failed to notice that there was a new Swaminarayan Mandir in their city, they got a very good idea on this day that something very special was happening. With Swamiji there to lead them, 12,000 people processed from Hyde Park down Park Lane and through Piccadilly Circus to Trafalgar Square. All the images that would be installed in the mandir were there to be shown to the people. The sun shone down on them, and for everybody who took part or just saw it all pass by, it was a most happy day. And so, 2 days later, on the 20th of August, came the greatest day of all, and everything was ready. Below a clear blue sky, the mandir, shining white as snow, was ready to become much more than just a beautiful building. Tens of thousands of people came from all over the world to share the occasion. Several thousand people sat watching television screens in a vast tent, because only a few hundred would be able to take part in the sacred ceremony inside the mandir itself. At 9:30 in the morning, Pramukh Swami arrived to perform the very special ceremony in the heart of the mandir. Here, in the mandir, is where the images stand. When Swamiji has performed the Murti Pratishta, those images will cease to be made merely of marble. Indeed, when this ceremony is over, the images will contain the very presence of God. They will, in effect, have become alive.
Brahma ke nijadhan devya vibhavai yukta steda sarvada.
It's almost impossible to overstate the importance of this ceremony. Up until now, the mandir is merely a beautiful pile of stone. In a few moments, it too will take on the essence of life. At the heart of the ceremony is the moment when Swamiji takes a fine brush, dips it in honey, and gently touches the eyes of the images. This is to give them sight and complete the process of bringing them to life. For those watching here in the mandir or on television far away, this was a dramatic and very emotional experience. And when the mirror was held up for the images to see, the people could stay quiet no longer. Nobody who was there would ever forget it. And to let the whole of London know that the mandir was open, Swamiji released 7,500 balloons for everyone to see. Even for the thousands who were not directly participating in the celebrations across the road, there was a wonderful feeling of pride and excitement that swept through the crowd. And in the great tent, thousands more shared the celebrations with the Indian High Commissioner and the British Home Secretary Michael Howard. Speeches were made, compliments exchanged, and then everybody settled down to enjoy the entertainment. But the most spectacular sight was outside, where thousands and thousands of people were waiting for their turn to see the wonders of what had been created. There was cold water for those who were thirsty and food for those who were hungry. In the planning and organizing of the day, nothing had been forgotten. They queued and waited for hours, but nobody complained and nobody left. It was worth the wait 100 times over. The mandir was now a part of their lives. One thing was sure, in all its uneventful history, the borough of Brent had never seen a day like this. And so the crowds departed, and the temple took on its role as a place of prayer and a place of peace. But the visitors kept on coming. In the first year, over 800,000 people came, not only from Europe, but from all over the world. School children from over 160 schools came to make drawings or just look and marvel at the designs and the wood carvings never seen before in Britain. In the mandir itself, there was a feeling of tranquility that everyone absorbed. For those who came to pray, there was an atmosphere of peace which every visitor felt, and every visitor would take away and treasure. In the first year, there were some great occasions. His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales came to see for himself just what it was that so many people were talking about.
I'm so glad Sacred Head on the right hand. This is also a sign of auspiciousness, and it binds us to the love of God. This is how we come together. Most welcome.
I seem to remember when I went to England.
And you have a friend here whom you met last time at Dr.
We met at
Swami's
house.
That's right, yes.
Nice to see you
Nice to see
here.
you again. Thank you.
With his passionate interest in architecture, there was obviously a great deal to take in. But it became clear to all the people who were there to greet him that it meant a great deal more to him than that. When he spoke, he probably summed up the feelings of most of the visitors who were to follow.
I'm sure no one who comes here will leave without having observed something of the calmness and spirit of the Hindu religion. I certainly have, and I can tell you I feel a great deal better for it.
When the prince's father, the Duke of Edinburgh, came here, he too was obviously impressed by the experience. And time had been allowed for him to meet many of the people who had worked for years to create the mandir. Politicians followed in their footsteps, like the leader of the Liberal Democratic Party. Born himself in India, Paddy Ashton understood better than most what the Mandir represents. Tony Blair was lucky enough to make his arrival coincide with a visit from Swamiji himself. It was a memorable occasion. Businessmen followed like Richard Branson and the local MP, Sir Rhodes Boyson. The press and television came almost every day as the news went out far and wide. For the people here in London, the happiest time of all was when Swamiji himself was here among them.
Pramukh Swami Mahu De Mare Brahmayagani Mahu Mahu.
Just over 3 years before, there had been nothing here at all but bare earth and rubble. Now, in their very own Haveli and their very own Mandir, Swamiji was here among the children and here to greet everyone. Their work was done, and for these people, the sacrifice had proved more than worthwhile. Swamiji himself said, "The Mandir is here to give peace. You should come here to pray, read, chant, sing. The Mandir is a true home for everyone." Not only for the Hindu community, but for all the thousands who have been and all the millions who have yet to come, this building is here to fulfill Pramukh Swami's description. It is a true home for everyone. Under the guidance of Swamiji, the Mandir was built from nothing in 3 years. It stands now as the fulfillment of a promise made 25 years before by a great visionary who knew that it would be needed and knew that it would be built.